All right, good morning, folks, and welcome to our new temporary quarters. All right, the folks have done a good job getting all this prepared for us. So we'll go ahead and call the workshop meeting into session, and we'll just move through each agenda item like we always do. And colleagues up here on the board, if you have something, just stop me. And Superintendent, yourself included, sir, please let us know if there's anything that you'd like to cover with us. All right, so the first item is called to order and then approval of the agenda. We do have an agenda change, and that is on the consent agenda. We added 7.5, appropriation of District 5 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Blue Water Elementary School for Clear Touch panels. And so with that, those are the only changes to the agenda. It takes us to recognitions, which we have none. And then we have administrative personnel appointments, 4.1, appointment of the assistant principal to 10-month to Ruckle Middle School, recommended by the superintendent. Then we go to public comment, 5.1 for agenda items. Section 6, committee and staff reports for workshop only. 6.1, Okaloosa Academy Incorporated Charter School financial statements and supplemental information for the year ended June 20th, 2024, presented by Ms. Perry, Chief Financial Officer. 6.2, Liza Jackson Preparatory School, Inc., basic financial statements and supplementary information for the year ended June the 30th, 2024, presented by Ms. Perry. And then 6.3, Destin High School, Inc., charter school financial statements and supplemental information for the year ended June 30th, 2024, also presented by Ms. Perry. That now takes us to consent agenda. 7.1 is approval. 7.2 is a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of September 23rd, 2024, and minutes of the workshop meeting September 23rd, 2024, minutes of the regular meeting of September 23rd, 2024, all recommended by Superintendent Chambers. 7.3, appropriation of District 2 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Elliott Point Elementary School for Clear Touch panels and accessories in the amount of $11,807, presented by Ms. Gardner and recommended by the superintendent. 7.4 is appropriation of District 5 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Niceville High School for stadium sound system upgrades in the amount of $9,740.02, presented by Mr. Brett Heinley and recommended by the superintendent. 7.5, appropriation of District 5 School Board Member Capital Outlay Funds to Blue Water Elementary School for Clear Touch panels in the amount of $5,879.50, presented by Mr. Heinley and recommended by the superintendent. 7.6 is a request to advertise the public hearing for revision of school board policies in Chapter 1, Governance and Operations, presented by Mr. McInnes and recommended by the superintendent. 7.7, request to advertise a public hearing for revision of school board policies in Chapter 3, Instructional Matters, presented by Ms. Sheila Lightbourne, Assistant Superintendent, and recommended by the superintendent. And then 7.8, request to advertise a public hearing for revision of school board policies in Chapter 5, Student Education Records, presented by Mr. Eric Mitchell, Director, MIS, Instructional Technology, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
And Dr. White.
Yes, sir.
I just want to take a moment to thank Mr. McInnes and each of the departments for going through this annual review. As you know, there's a lot of statute that is involved in these changes or revisions or tweaks, but a lot of time and effort goes into getting these policies before you today. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. All right, so that now takes us to 7.9, tag on bid purchase over $50,000 to Howard Technology, presented by Mr. Vince Wyndham, Program Director Purchasing, and recommended by the superintendent. 7.10, invoices to be approved for payment, presented by Ms. Perry and recommended by the superintendent. 7.11, school donations, presented by Ms. Perry and recommended by the superintendent. 7.12, revised travel manual, presented by Ms. Perry and recommended by the superintendent. 7.13, renewal of ITB 22-02 wastewater treatment plant operator services, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.14, renewal of ITB 20-02 site improvements, time and materials, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.15, renewal of ITB 23-01 UVC virus kill systems, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.16, tag on bid purchase over $50,000 to Howard Technology, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.17, tag on bid purchase over $50,000 to Train, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.18, tag on bid purchase over $50,000 to the Apple Store, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.19, tag on bid purchase over $50,000 to Navistar, doing business as Fleet Charge, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.20, exempted purchase over $50,000 to Knowledge Pillars Education, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.21, exempted purchase over $50,000 to Brain Pop, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.22, exempted purchase over $50,000, estimated figures for Advanced International Certificate of Education and Advanced Placement Examinations, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.23, service agreement number 25-82 to S3 Strategies, Inc., License Incorporated, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.24, service agreement number 25-86 to Maria Pavone, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.25, service agreement number 25-90 Therapy, presented by Mr. Wyndham and recommended by the superintendent. 7.26, permission to open before and after school and summer daycare program at Southside Primary School, presented by Ms. Amy Bowles, Principal, Southside Elementary School, and recommended by the superintendent for approval.
I want to ask something about that.
Sure.
So how many will that give us now when we open that, if we open that one?
We can get you that exact number. We have a number at the elementary schools, some who house their own and some the Boys and Girls Club, but we can
Right.
get you that exact number.
Okay, thank you.
All right, 7.27, Teleforce Task Order number 210 for MEG security camera upgrades, presented by Mr. Dustin Keith and recommended by the superintendent. And then 7.28, Florida Safe Schools Assessment School Tool District Best Practices, presented by Mr. Danny Dean and recommended by the superintendent. That takes us through the consent items. All right, Section 8, Superintendent's Human Resources Recommendations. 8.1, information only, employees on administrative leave. 8.2, information only, deferred retirement option program. And then 8.3, out of field report for the 2024-2025 school year, presented by Ms. Duran, Program Director, and recommended by the superintendent. 8.4, forgiveness of workday for all employees due to inclement weather, September 26, 2024, and Eglin Elementary School employees on September 27, 2024, due to base restrictions, presented by Dr. Hale and recommended by the superintendent. 8.5, employment separations, presented by Dr. Hale and recommended by the superintendent. 8.6, personnel recommendations, presented by Dr. Hale and recommended by the superintendent. 8.7, employee transfers, presented by Dr. Hale and recommended by the superintendent. And then 8.8, employee suspension, presented by Dr. Hale and recommended by the superintendent. And then finally, 8.9, leave without pay, presented by Dr. Hale and recommended by the superintendent. Takes us to Section 9, discussion, then Section 10, attorney's business. Mr. McKinnis, sir?
No report at this time.
Thank you, sir. That takes us to section 11, superintendent's business. 11.1, out-of-state student trip request, and then 11.2, anything else the superintendent may have. Superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. White, School Board. I do have a few items that I want to share, and then one presentation regarding FTE. We just finished FTE, our FTE week. But I first want to say, as you see, we're all here in the new temporary school board meeting area, and I think we're blessed to be in this room right now. But I do want to thank Mr. Spolsky and his team, Mr. Meyer and his team, in getting this facility ready. This has been months and months in the making, and especially the last several weeks to get all the technology in place, to get the dais set up, a lot of trial and error to make sure all of this occurs. Mr. McNeely, Hillary Demers in here with our Jacobs folks getting all of this ready. Mr. Barry doing a good job. So just want to say to the board, you know, we get to walk in and it's kind of seamless, but there's been a lot of work on the front side and all sides to get this ready. So just very appreciative for this. We'll be in here a few months until the new school board meeting is ready, but I think we're in a good place. For those who may be watching, this will be the new training room as well. So this almost doubles our space of what it used to be. So you will see teachers in here, you will see staff in here, you will see administrators in here, and it gives us the ability to really house the vast majority of our training here, because in the future plans we'll also have another smaller training area as well as some other areas that we have within this facility. So this will be a busy place. It already is, but even more traffic will continue to come in here. So I think that's a blessing. I do want to say the last meeting, or one of the last meetings, we talked about Hurricane Helene, and now we'll talk about Hurricane Milton. And just again, our thoughts and prayers being with those impacted. We have been in communication with some of the counties down south. So we're ready to help in any way that we can. I do want to share with this board, and you already know as a reminder, you know, when we have our weather-related events that occur in this area, Mr. Spolsky and myself were in constant communication with Patrick Maddox. New leadership is at Eglin Air Force Base, and new leadership has taken even more of a role. Eglin's always done a good job, but they've taken even more of a role in communicating with us as well. And then we've also reached out to Herbert, had a great meeting there. So we will be receiving information not only from Patrick Maddox, who's our main source, who does an absolutely fantastic job, but even getting more information from the Air Force bases. Myself and Mr. Spolsky do a lot of communicating during that time. Mr. Spolsky then takes the lead and talks to Mr. Meyer in maintenance and facilities, talks with Hillary, making sure that the communication side of the house, and Ms. Card, the communication side of the house. We have a list of everyone who is to be communicated with, from principals to staff teachers, the union, military, different affiliations with the school district. So a lot happens behind the scenes. And I know the school board knows we try not to act too swiftly. We want to make sure that we have all the accurate data. And what Patrick Maddox will tell you is, I know folks can look at the apps or they can look at the websites, and those aren't always accurate. They get the accurate information from the experts over in Mobile, and we also get accurate information from those in the military. Once we have that accurate information, then we make the best decision possible. And like I tell people all the time, in the seat that I sit in, some folks are going to be happy with that decision and some won't, but once all the information comes in that's factual, then we make a decision, communicate with you all as well, so we're all on the same page. But our thoughts and prayers definitely go out to those still impacted by Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. As you know, the last couple weeks has been extremely busy with ribbon cuttings. And I do just want to say this. You think about, I think we're about to go into the 4th year of the half-cent sales tax, and you know how much has been done. We still have 6 years to go. And whether it be single point of entry, whether it be the perimeter fencing, the classroom additions, the multi-purpose buildings, the new cafeterias, replacing air conditioning systems, replacing roofs, new parking, paving, bathrooms, floors, and the list, it goes on and on. And all of this has happened in less than 4 years. And as you know, it's also made our capital budget even stronger, where before we had about $5 to $6 million and sometimes $4 million to fix the entire district. Before the half-cent sales tax, we had about $29 million that came in from capital. Now we're at about $43 million in capital that comes from the state, and that's because property values have gone up. But now our half-cent sales tax mixed with capital dollars, we're able to do even more. So just very appreciative with that. As you know, the last couple weeks, we've done a ribbon cutting over at Lewis School. We've done one at Baker as well, and Choctaw. Each of those schools did an absolutely fantastic job highlighting not only the big buildings, but highlighting the other capital projects that they've done as well. As a reminder to this board, right now, we should have received approximately $70 million in half-cent sales tax funds. We're at approximately $116 million of half-cent sales tax funds that have come in. So over 40 million more. And the thing that I want to say to this board, which we say to the community all the time, with those additional dollars, we do not say, what can we now spend it on? We spend it on specifically the school's project lists that were voted on, as well as any items within the referendum, and make sure that we do exactly what we said we were going to do with the money. As you know, we have a citizens oversight group comprised of those not in the school district that also ensure that we spend our money on specifically what we said we were going to spend it on. So the past 2 weeks just doing those ribbon cuttings, it was exciting. There's so much more to come, as you know. We're about to be knocking some trees down in the future with our new K-8 school. And our new K-8 school, led by Mrs. Ivanchek, will be having a new name soon. So we won't have to say K-8 school. We'll actually have a name.
Just the Ivanchek School.
Well,
That's your vote.
there could be some traction. Who knows? But we're excited because, as you know, school board, we had our students and faculty and staff across the district submit names of what they thought would be a good one. And Mr. Meyer will be accumulating some of those names and bringing it over to Mrs. Ivanchek, and we'll be looking at what that name is going to look like as we go forward. So that's exciting. I do want to share with the board, last year we started our first annual, and now we're in a second annual, and it's Thanksgiving meals, and there'll also be something for the holiday season as well. But with the Thanksgiving meals, Mrs. Card has led the effort to feed families during that time. We're partnering with several folks, Jacobs Titan, Eglin Federal Credit Union, Florida Power and Light, the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation, and Publix. Last year we fed over 119 families. This year will be much more due to the dollars that we're able to get to feed these families. So I remember last year when those families were coming to pick up their meals, the smiles on the faces. So I just thank you, Ms. Card, for setting that up in the leadership, and also thank all the people who will help, because getting that food over here to our freezers, making sure that it's all set up and passing it out on the day of is a task. So, but we're happy to give back. The 2024 National Civics Bee is coming, and we're partnering with the Fort Walton Beach Chamber, and our goal is to represent not only at the state level, but also at the national level. And it's just another opportunity for our students to take part in civic-natured things, learn about our country, learn about how government works. So there'll be an essay that will be written, and there'll be judges who will read these essays, and then there'll be those who will win, so to speak. But $100,000 of college savings plans students have the ability to earn. So we're very excited to get that going. Mrs. Ivanchek, I know, is going to say something about the 4th annual barbecue and bingo, so I'm just going to let that be a teaser, and everyone will be waited with bated breath until she speaks. And then I want to finish with, as you know, this year we started by each of our board workshops representing or recognizing different departments or different groups of employees. And today, we're going to recognize MIS, and that's under the leadership of Mr. Spolsky. But it's also under the leadership of Ms. Duska Ross, Ms. Wendy Meserve, and Mr. Eric Mitchell. And they have under them approximately 40 employees who do so much behind the scenes that we would never think of. But without those individuals doing exactly what they do, our school district would not run as efficiently as it runs. And each of these individuals, highly skilled, great communication, and they're respected across the state. When you look at each of our curriculum resources that has to work, well, you can thank MIS. When you look at FTE and what happens and the eventual funding that comes, well, you can thank MIS. When you look at the technology that occurs throughout this district, you can thank MIS. So much happens and so much more happens that we don't even realize. So I just am extremely grateful for each and every one of them in terms of what they do. And Mr. Spolsky might have some more specific information.
Thank you, Superintendent Chambers, Chairman, board members, council. Such accurate words. The MIS department is on cue. They're on skilled, and they're a pleasure to work with. I will tell you, our gym here we call Okaloosa County School District. We are very, very fortunate to have them. And there's one specific person I would like to recognize from MIS, and that is Miss Mary Reinley. If you would just come stand here for a minute. As she's coming up, Miss Mary won't brag about herself. She's very humble, but she first commenced her career in the 1980s. She worked for a word processing company, and then she actually moved away for a little while, came back to us while her husband was at Hurlburt Field. Very interesting, she worked for Okaloosa Gas, and then in 2006, she came and joined our team here at the Okaloosa County School District. So she's been with us a while as a senior program analyst. I will tell you her skills were put to the test in 2022 when we did our transition to the Focus system. She not only became our go-to expert, but she actually helped us with specific projects like MTSS and threat assessment. And I will tell you, the Focus team calls Mary and asks her advice on how to do things sometimes. She's done amazing work with our mental health counselors, our district's Medicaid billing, and as I said, her talents are sought after through the whole state with what she's been able to accomplish with Focus. She's married to Jeff, she has 2 daughters, and of course I had to share that she has graduates of Fort Walton Beach High School. I am honored that I get to recognize Miss Mary Reinley. Congratulations. Mr. Chambers, if you would come down and present a coin to Ms. Reinley for me. She said she's a little clammy because she's nervous today, but I just appreciate what she does for us.
Dr. White, if you don't mind, really quickly.
Sure.
And Ms. Ross, Ms. Meserve, Mr. Mitchell, if you would please stand. I think you all know these individuals. And again, we would not be the school district that we are without each of you in terms of what you do every day. So I just want to say thank you.
At this time, I'll transition a little bit, if that's okay, to speak specifically to FTE. And what I'd like to do is this workshop and then an upcoming workshop at the end of October, beginning of November, we'll look at specifically some of our numbers. So we'll dig into this, this presentation, this slide deck for a few moments here. So first of all, it's important to know that this is backed obviously by state statute 1011, and it literally requires us to conduct a report of our student membership. And this full-time equivalent, these FTEs, are how we are funded. And if you look at the second bullet there, they capture the information in October and in February. So I highlighted the blue October survey 2 there for you in parentheses, because that's what we just finished up last week, October 7th to the 11th. A lot of adjustments were made because of the hurricanes for some of those Big Bend and also some of those South Florida and Central districts. So they'll do some extensions and they'll have to go through some waiver pieces.
Dr. White, if I could ask Mr. Spolsky a quick,
Yes.
With people watching this particular presentation, and I know we have a new board member here also, could you, when we see like FTE and all those, could you pronounce them out so people who are watching this would know what FTE stood for and all that? Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. And so the third bullet there, date certain, is actually the specific day in which we look at the student schedules so that we can get a record so that we report it by the minutes. And the next slide here will kind of help with some of that. So FTE, the full-time equivalent, is generally defined as one student, and you can look at the numbers and the minutes and the hours there. It's 1,500 minutes, 25 hours a week, 180 or 290 day. And then it's important you see those last three words, or the equivalent, because you know both of our semesters aren't equal here based on calendar committee and some of that work. So if we do have a situation where our calendar's off by the 90 days, then we still qualify for equivalent. And a lot of school districts manipulate that calendar. So what we do in terms of the state is we say half of an FTE is the first semester, the second bullet there, and half of the FTE is the second semester. Survey 2 and 3 are the big ones. 1, 2, 3, and 4 we do collections. 1 and 4 is for DJJ. 2 and 3 is our school year. It's just so you have a clear picture of that. So the Florida Department of Education really is asking for a snapshot of activity that's occurring within our schools. And then what happens is we provide the data. We take the data that they give back to us, and that's how we set our staffing grids. That's how we do our staffing plans. That's what generates our money. And Focus is our system and serves as our vehicle to send that information back and forth. This also ties in, obviously, to the FEFP, or the Florida Education Finance Program. One example of that would be an ESE, where students that do qualify for those special services, they actually have program numbers, and depending on what services that they are receiving from us, then they would have a IEP, then we would send that in through Focus, and then we would have different weightings and different calculations. So to generate that FEFP, or that Florida Education Finance funding, each teacher must have a course record for the courses that are taught, both for Survey 2 and Survey 3, and then the calculation happens. That is done with a classroom, and you can see up there it says a FISH number, which is the way we number our classrooms in our buildings, which stands for the Florida Inventory of Schoolhouses. And that file, that FISH file, has to be submitted back and forth between us and the state.
And Mr. Spolsky, if you don't mind, I would just interject as a matter of interest. Very appropriate that your staff at MIS was recognized today, because as the public may not be aware, that's where all this data comes from.
Yes, sir.
It comes from MIS, all the computers in our schools, this data that captures these student hours and where they sit and what rooms they're in according to what you call the FISH report. All of that is spelled out through MIS, and that's where this data comes from, and we're so grateful to the folks in MIS for what they do. And I sort of understand now why, when the legislature created the requirement to have an MIS system, that they stipulated that in those school districts that did not have an MIS school system, the superintendent would not be paid. And that was a great motivator.
Yes, sir.
And so now across all of the states, we have MIS departments that are doing this good work. And I just thought it might be worthwhile to share with the public that that's where all this information comes from.
Yes,
It comes from your MIS group.
Thank you, Dr. White, absolutely. If we look at the next slide here, and I put a date on here, February 19th of 2024, so think with me on that. That was last school year. but that was a date when senior staff and MIS worked collaboratively to forecast our numbers for this year. So it's real important we take a look at all of these different numbers out there. We look at child find, we look at historical data, and then we do some calculations. It is important to remember a full-time equivalent, or an FTE, is not enrollment. So I want that to kind of sit for a second. Just because we have one child doesn't mean it's going to equal to an FTE. At the elementary grades, it's pretty close. When you get into the middle grades, it's pretty close. In high school, because we have different course offerings, we have to really look at 6 periods as an FTE and not anything less than that, a full-time equivalent. We
So,
also-
excuse me,
Yes,
so
sir.
what you're saying is we have more students enrolled than we have FTE numbers?
Absolutely, sir. It's not unusual to have a high school which will have 2,000 students and capture 1,700, 1,600 FTE because of no classes, study halls, late start, partial schedules, lots of things. Virtual offerings, homeschool, family empowerment scholarships, all of these different variables make this much more difficult to calculate than it did 15, 20 years ago. I know Dr. White, when he had me as an instructor, said, we can come within this many FTE, a small portion of our percentage, working with Mr. Connor and all of our experts at MIS. And now with all these different variables, Mr. Hiley, it is a very complex formula to come up with.
Right, that's right. I agree.
But one thing I want to point out, please, is that we're one of the few districts left that offers a 7-period class day that balances some of that. So like you said, study halls and so forth, but they have 7 opportunities to actually get 6 classes in. So it doesn't, where some schools have 6 periods, and if they're off any, it hurts more,
Yes,
right?
ma'am, Ms. Ivanchek. And at our next meeting, I will bring you exactly the breakdown of the 67 districts. Mr. Peterson, who also works in conjunction with MIS.
Right?
He's like a special agent for us. He does a lot of projects as it pertains to numbers. He will have a look for all of us, because that's something Mr. Chambers and I have been talking about, is just how do we sit in that equation in terms of the 67 districts in the 6-period, the 7-period, or the 8-period option. Because some of those schools are in block even on it.
Right, and the block games, yeah.
And Ms. Vanchek, I think it's important to note, because we're talking about this for the public, that's a local decision.
Yes, sir.
Recommended by the superintendent, and that this school board votes based on the budget that is submitted by the superintendent, that we fund that 7th period
Yes.
locally. The state doesn't fund that.
Yep. So our board continues to vote to do that, which I think is a benefit to our students.
No question. If you, at one time, they did a study as to what would happen if we ever went back to a 6-period day. And I'll just say that the impact on curriculum offerings was maybe nothing short of catastrophic.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
That's an interesting transition, sir, because that last bullet there where it says FTE is prorated to a max of 1. At our next phase of FTE talk, I will bring back to you the cost factors, which shows at a basic student right now, not only for 9 through 12 basic, but 9 through 12 basic with ESC, we are funded at a 0.978. So not even a whole FTE. That's where another layer to that complicated piece. I did want to bring your attention to the blue box in the center of the slide. This was our FTE projection for this school year. So once we get all of our numbers calculated and we get everything gathered from last week, at the next workshop, I'll bring to you where we sit in terms of our projection versus our actual earned FTE, because we'll use that number as we're moving forward into Survey 3, which is in February. And once we have Survey 2 from October and Survey 3 in February, that's where we can really get those numbers hammered down.
And Mr. Spolsky,
Sir?
in school board, so when you look at that number, the 28,113.1, and I don't have the exact number, but when you look at our student enrollment throughout the district to include charter schools, over 32,000 bodies But then you look at the 28,000 FTE, and Mr. Spolsky did a very good job explaining. So especially at the high school level where they might take 5 classes, 4 classes, and with the online classes such as Okaloosa Online, where we used to get some of that funding, and now if you go over whatever that max number is, you don't receive it. So it's that also becomes more challenging, even though it's great offerings for students. But it's just interesting to look at the 28,000, knowing that we have probably 4,000 more bodies.
And the superintendent, to add to that, and the members of the public might say, well, they sure do focus a lot on numbers of students. And the reason is, and it might be something that you're going to cover, and we've covered it before, that those are the numbers that we use to construct our anticipated budget. And so the numbers that Ms. Perry brings to us for a budget are based on these projections of student enrollment. And I'll just say, having been through this a number of times, you want to get close.
Yes, sir.
You want to get real close, because if you don't, then there are consequences for that. Either you have to hire staff or you have to reduce staff, because we fund our educational system based on occupied student seats. And that's what that number really is all about.
Yes, sir, Doctor. That is spot on. Yes, sir.
And let me add one thing there, and I'd say this to Ms. Meserve, who does a great job in this area. If you remember, and I don't have the exact number, so this year, the state of Florida said that we would be, let's just say, 400 more students than what we thought that we would be. So Ms. Meserve giving that information to Ms. Perry is crucial, because Ms. Perry now knows we do not anticipate having what the state model says, and it's not that the state said it,
Good.
it's the state model. So that amount of money is already pulled to the side.
Good.
Then Ms. Perry also has an FTE reserve that she also pulls to the side in case there's a shortfall. And what Mr. Spolsky said is spot on. When you start looking at all the online offerings, you now look at the Family Empowerment Scholarship, you look at charter offerings, and the Family Empowerment Scholarships, that's pretty impactful, but you don't necessarily know specifically who's going to take those options. Kindergarten enrollment is down. So when you start looking at those things, Mrs. Meserve trying to do the FTE projection is where before we may have been within 10 students, sometimes right on 5 students, and now it's very tricky, and I'll use Mr. Spolsky's word of complex, to get right at the number that you need to be at.
Well, and because as you've already said, Superintendent, just to highlight, there's so many options now that folks can exercise. And so a child may not attend school all day. There may be a pullout, or, I mean, just a myriad of options. And so, yes, I would say it's at least very complex.
Yes, sir, Doc. I did want you to see that before last week, in September, this group behind me offered training for our assistant principals, our registrars, to ensure that we are counting and getting all of the FTE at each of those sites. Each site in our district-operated schools makes up that 28,000, and it is critical. Of course, when you add the charters, when you add the Okaloosa Online and you add the DJJ, that FTE would be at the 32,000 range with those different sites. But our district-operated schools, it is critical for them to make sure that we're getting those, because it sets the budget, as Dr. White said. We do all of our planning for the following summer and the following year. It sets our staffing patterns. It ultimately is what keeps us running, whether it's buses, whether it's equipment, classrooms, capital, all of that stuff. So, any questions for me on this presentation this morning?
I just have one comment. So, Mr. Spolsky, one, school board members, we don't get to see the slides ahead of time. So, one, I appreciate you already having all that requested information. You must have been, when you were putting this together, I think Mr. Bryant's going to want to know what all the acronyms say. So, you did a good job of doing that. But I do want to apologize. But thank you also for, having that clearly put out there, and great presentation. So.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Spolsky. All right, Superintendent.
And that is it.
Oh, all right, very good. All right, colleagues, so we'll go ahead and move through the remaining part of the agenda. We have school board members' announcements, and so, Mrs. Vanchek, ma'am, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Couple of things. The superintendent already mentioned ribbon cutting. Of course, the school that I represent, Baker, I was very proud to represent them the other day. They did a wonderful job, and I just want to tell Principal Martello and his crew what a fabulous presentation they did. It was exciting to see the students involved, and also exciting that at Baker there were so many areas to see beyond the multipurpose room, the AI program, the culinary lab was fabulous, criminal justice. In fact, Ms. McClendon there has just been named their Teacher of the Year, so that's exciting. And then we ended up in the front where they have those beautiful new flagpoles and the flags. So it was wonderful. I was certainly very proud of my Gators and everyone up there, and was glad to be a part of that and honored. So that was very, very exciting to be up there. Oh, yes, we have the barbecue and bingo. This is our Public Schools Foundation major event that we have every year. It's coming up on October 29th, and I'm hoping that the public will come out as well as the school district folks, and it's a lot of fun. I go every year. I never win. I even know how to play, but I still don't win. And so, but I still go back. And so in all seriousness, you know, the foundation's two main functions, one is mentoring students, and at the end of the program, they end up with a Bright Future Scholarship that we fund part of. And then also, we fund classroom grants for teachers who might not have the funds to do some special projects in their classroom, and we do thousands of dollars worth of that. And this particular event helps fund those things. So it's very important while we have some fun and do that. So I hope that people will come out and do that. Also, exciting that we're ended the first 9 weeks of school. So today, teachers are working in their classrooms to get ready to summarize the first 9 weeks, get those grades in, and also to get ready for the next 9 weeks. And when we finish that one, we'll be heading out for the holidays. It's really going fast. But I did want to make a remark on our members that are here from MIS, because I want you to know that these individuals, the three here today, Ms. Reinley, Ms. Meserve, and Ms. Ross, I've now been on the board 6 years, but when I was in the classroom, we heard those same names. And that says a lot about these employees who've been around a long time. I've always heard those names about we do, and of course we hear Ms. Meserve and those numbers and all that. So that says a lot that you have that long-term commitment to the district, and I appreciate you and your expertise and what you give to us and help us, the board and the staff, make those right decisions. So thank you so much. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Vanchek. Mr. Bryant.
Thank you, Dr. White, and I would echo Ms. Vanchek's comments with our MIS department. Thank you very much for all that you do. I would agree that 2022 was a very important chapter in the history of our school district when we went from 1970s based computers to the 21st century. Of course, you know, when you do that, there's a lot of growing pains when it comes to that. But now that we've been 2 years with Focus, I don't think any employee would want to go back to the old system. I would also like to extend my thanks to my fellow school board members for supporting me in my role as the president of Florida School Boards Association this year. As you know, the first meeting in September, I was not present due to the fact that I was in Washington, D.C., representing not only our district but the state. But then 2 weeks ago, with the help of the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation, Ms. Floyd, Ms. McGowan, Ms. Card, Ms. Demers, everybody that was involved in helping us put together our Florida School Board's board retreat. As many might not know, that the president, the sitting president, has the pleasure of having the board meeting in their home county. So it was nice that I only had to go 30 minutes down the road, whereas some had to actually fly into our meeting. But we had board members from as far south as Key West up to Jacksonville across to be able to come to visit our beautiful Okaloosa Island, and I know everybody was real appreciative of everything that was done. I would also like to thank Superintendent Russell Hughes from Walton County, Representative Pat Maney, and also our Superintendent, Mr. Chambers, for coming and speaking at our Board of Directors meeting, and also to John Williams and his staff at OTC, because the hotel kicked us out on the last day as they were preparing for a busy weekend. We had to find a new home, and OTC is where we finished up our meeting. And also to all the business sponsors who helped provide lunch for that. We definitely appreciate that. But my fellow board members, thank you so very much. And I would also like to extend to my fellow board member on my left here, Mr. Heinley, who was appointed by the superintendent about 2 months ago. But one of the first things he asked me was, hey, what about this bet with the shirt, Niceville and Crestview? And I said, oh, I'm still on with it. So, of course, Crestview did not beat Niceville this year. That's okay. But he did ask Mr. Morello. He goes, hey, you got a shirt for Mr. Bryant? And Mr. Morello says, oh, he's already got one. So I wanted to make sure I had my Niceville shirt on today, to be a good sport with Mr. Heinley. But I can almost assure you next year, hopefully, we'll have a Crestview shirt for him to wear. But I tell you, doing these little fun things with my fellow board members is always something that shows that, hey, even though we root for our teams that are in the zones that we are representing, we do represent the entire school district. So wearing a Niceville shirt today or wearing a Choctaw shirt in Washington, D.C., it's all about pride in our school district. So, so this is the fun part of our job, when we can represent not only our schools, but also highlight the schools that that are outside of our zone. And with that, Dr. White, I think I'm done.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bryant. Mr. Heinley.
Great presentation, and I have a lot of questions. And some of them are with acronyms. I appreciate you, honoring that bet. And I will tell you that I had enough confidence. I still don't have a Crestview shirt, so I didn't pre-do it. So, all right, going with the tradition. And Mrs. Vanchek, you are excused since you got it last meeting. Today is the 14th. So who is the 14th president of the United States?
I know. Franklin Pierce.
You got it. I'm gonna start making it harder for you guys.
Hold on. Do we know the years?
Yes, I do. Go ahead.
1853 to 1857.
Well, the good thing is that we all know the 16th president, was Abraham Lincoln. So I was trying to go back a couple. So thankfully, there's Google out there to help me.
Thanks for Google. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Heinley. And I'll just say that I, too, attended a grand opening ceremony at the school in my district. And as Mr. Bryant says, we do represent all schools. But at my school, Choctawhatchee, was a great ceremony where we opened the new multi-purpose room and the new lobby. And it was just, it was wonderful, well done, and beautiful facility. And, I'll share something that happened to me when this past summer, I was speaking to a band director from another high school in our county. And I always worry about the heat in the summer because y'all know how hot it is. And I worry about the kids on the fields, the athletic fields, and I worry about those band students too, because they're out there sometimes twice a day and it's hot. And I asked him, I said, okay, now, so how are y'all doing with the heat? And he said, you know what? That new multi-purpose room is wonderful because when it's unbearable, we can take our band in there and we have that facility to use, and we've never had that before. And I thought I'd just share that story with the public so that they understand that the use of these facilities is immense. in a variety of ways and very, very helpful to the schools and to the students and to all the folks that are involved in our schools every day. All right, so that kind of takes us through the regular agenda items there, and it takes us down to public comment. And yes, sir? Oh, excuse me, thank you. We have construction report, and so I know that are we going to have a report this evening?
So, yes, sir. I would like to thank Ms. Gardner for sitting in on the last meeting. And yes, as soon as we're done here, we are zipping over to room 409 to get the construction meeting. We should have a report tonight for you.
All right, so we're not going to have one today. It'll be maybe this evening is the plan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right then. All right, so then public comment, and then we do have a public hearing, 15.1, for the adoption of School Board Policies, Chapter 4 students, presented by Ms. Lamb and recommended by the superintendent for approval. All right, so that takes us through the agenda. And colleagues, superintendent, anything else? Mr. Attorney, are we good? Yes, sir. All right, staff, associations, we're all good? Okay, this meeting is adjourned.